What's good? It's Woog. We are just getting a glimpse into what the lightweight division is going to look like in the wake of Devin Haney relinquishing his undisputed status as he goes up to 140. And this weekend, we've got a pretty good fight at lightweight between William Zepeda, 28 wins and 0 losses, and Mercito Gesta, 34 wins, 3 losses, and 3 draws. We are just a few days removed from the disappointing news that Frank Martin pulled out of the Shakur Stevenson fight. And Frank Martin now, at least according to most of what the boxing public understands, is one of several fighters who have more or less turned down a fight with Shakur Stevenson, which now would actually mean that you are fighting for a vacant WBC belt. So that's what Stevenson versus Frank Martin was about to be. So now we're going to see if Stevenson instead fights Edwin De Los Santos, the guy who just beat Jose Valenzuela, and then Joseph Adorno. These things are still yet to be determined. I mean, hell, I hope that quietly they come back to the table, renegotiate whatever they need to, and in fact make Shakur Stevenson versus Frank Martin. That's what I would like. But you know, Frank Martin wouldn't be the first person to turn down an opportunity to fight Shakur Stevenson. We've heard that Isaac Cruz has shown a lack of interest. Vasily Lomachenko is going back to has gone back to the Ukraine and doesn't plan to fight for the rest of 2023 when they were at first talking about Shakur Stevenson versus Vasily Lomachenko. Although I do suspect that when Lomachenko does return, I feel like it's going to be for a vacant IBF title, because right now, again, Devin Haney holds all the belts. It's just a matter of when the different sanctioning bodies strip him as he prepares for the upcoming fight against Regis Prograis. But in that IBF path, you've got Gustavo Lemos, who was ranked number 1, and I think that the IBF has removed Lemos from their rankings. I'm going to double check that, but that's my understanding. And then you've got George Kambosos, ranked number 2 challenger by the IBF, and Vasily Lomachenko, ranked number 3. So I think we're going to get Lomachenko versus Kambosos for the vacant IBF belt. And the way that things are shaping up promotionally, to me, it looks like we're going to get Gervonta Davis, if I had to guess now, against Isaac Cruz for the full WBA championship, because you know Gervonta Davis has held that lesser WBA lightweight belt for some time now, but now again, since Devin Haney won't be holding that WBA super belt for much longer, I think it's going to be Gervonta Davis versus Isaac Cruz. But as I mentioned, you've had Frank Martin, you've had Isaac Cruz, you've had Lomachenko turn down opportunities to fight Shakur Stevenson, and you've got William Zepeda, who was among the fighters who, according to Shakur Stevenson, communicated that they were not interested in that matchup. But that's not to say that William Zepeda is not a good fighter. He clearly is, and he's got this very interesting style of not only being super high volume, and I'm talking like sometimes 100 plus punches per round, super high volume, but they're not pity pat types of shots. These are power punches, like scorching power punches. And you can see it in the results of the fights. Out of William Zepeda's 28 wins, 24 have come via knockout or stoppage. Now, he did have some trouble 2 fights ago against Rene Alvarado, where to me, it was anyone's guess who might have won that fight. But he was granted a unanimous decision win, which isn't surprising given, you know, how some of these A-side fighters are treated in some of these kind of questionable decisions. But William Zepeda had actually made his name in like middle of 2021 when he had a knockout victory over Hector Tanahara Jr., who was a blue chipper and kind of a surging prospect at that time. And William Zepeda totally spoiled that party. And you know, Hector Tanahara hasn't been in the ring since. Again, we're talking mid 2021. Whereas William Zepeda has had 5 fights since. The third of those 5 fights was that difficult fight against Rene Alvarado, and then he just totally obliterated Joseph Diaz. He didn't stop Diaz, but man, he was beating the hell out of Jojo Diaz throughout those 12 rounds. And yes, Diaz did have his moments late in the fight. He caught Zepeda pretty damn cleanly a couple times later on in that fight, but man, just the amount of punches that Jojo Diaz absorbed was pretty horrendous. Like, William Zepeda was just lighting him on fire round after round with that high volume activity. And it's not like Zepeda is being totally reckless. He is a little bit measured and is better than advertised when it comes to his range control. He's got pretty long arms. He's tall for the division. He's 5'9", and he was just way too much of a cyclone of activity for Jojo Diaz to handle. William Zepeda is one of these guys who I say puts their opponents on a treadmill from hell, where the pace, the volume, the activity, just the overall exertion of energy is too much for the opponent to handle. William Zepeda is one of these guys, and again, he hits pretty damn hard. And his only fight since that beating of Jojo Diaz in October of 2022 was a second round knockout over Jaime Arboleda in April of this year. So that was pretty recent. I mean, Zepeda's been a pretty damn active fighter, and Mercito Gesta, now 35 years old, is coming off of kind of a feel-good late career win over Joseph Jojo Diaz. So the fight before that was against Joel Diaz Jr., and that was a unanimous decision win for Mercito Gesta. So then he was supposed to fight Jojo Diaz in what was supposed to be the Zurdo Ramirez versus Gabriel Rosado undercard. But since Zurdo pulled out due to missing weight badly, well, he didn't pull out, he missed weight badly, and that fight was canceled. Jojo Diaz versus Mercito Gesta was elevated to the main event, and Mercito Gesta pulled off one of the more, I would say one of the bigger upsets of the year. And this was a split decision win where Gesta, boxed very well early in the fight, and he showed that dog in the middle and late rounds, did enough to earn a close split decision win over Jojo Diaz. And those two wins against Joel Diaz Jr. and against Jojo Diaz after that, they came after losing 2 out of his last 4 fights and then fighting to a draw in another one. So he was basically 1-2-1 in his last 4 fights before these recent back-to-back wins. So this has been a good late career resurgence for Mercito Gesta, who trains at a wild card gym and lives in Orange County. That's where I'm from. But Mercito Gesta, it was looking like, was about to kind of wrap up his career. I mean, he lost a decision against Jorge Linares in 2018. Then he had one win against a lesser known fighter, a majority decision win over Robert Manzanares. And then he fought a dog fight against Juan Antonio Rodriguez. This was in the middle of 2019. And this became a battle of attrition. You could tell that Mercito Gesta was not properly managing his gas tank. He looked tired by the middle rounds, and he ended up just getting stopped in the 9th round by Juan Rodriguez. And then Mercito Gesta fought to a technical draw, 6-round technical draw against Carlos Morales. And then he had those 2 back-to-back fights against Joel Diaz Jr. and Joseph Jojo Diaz. So when I'm sizing up William Zepeda versus Mercito Gesta, I wouldn't be surprised if he boxes fairly well in the early rounds here. Here's the thing, even against Jojo Diaz, there would be these long moments where Mercito Gesta, when he wasn't moving laterally and sticking the jab out and counterpunching effectively against a southpaw, this is another southpaw. Mercito Gesta is a southpaw. So just like William Zepeda versus Jojo Diaz and Mercito Gesta versus Jojo Diaz, William Zepeda versus Mercito Gesta will be southpaw versus southpaw. So all these guys are pretty used to fighting southpaws at this point. But Mercito Gesta would move laterally well. He would back up and kind of diagonally well while flicking out the right hand jab to kind of keep Jojo Diaz at bay. Jojo Diaz, however, was able to kind of pin Mercito Gesta, or at least Mercito Gesta would allow himself to be caught up against the ropes, not throwing too much in return. And when he would throw, it would look a little bit wild to where you've got these firefights with your back against the ropes. And he would do this for long periods of time. And Jojo Diaz would often steal some of those rounds due to some of those, either because you were fatigued or you just weren't moving well, whatever the case. Some of those opportunities and moments would lead to Jojo Diaz stealing a round. Well, if you do that against William Zepeda, you might get dropped or stopped. William Zepeda does not give you too many opportunities to just kind of sit there and feel safe in doing so. So Mercito Gesta, he's had some difficulty in managing his gas tank. I've seen him in several fights where he looks a little worn out or tired in the later rounds. That just seems like a recipe for disaster against a guy like William Zepeda. And Joseph Jojo Diaz does not hit nearly as hard as Zepeda. Jojo Diaz is not a knockout guy, like especially not at lightweight. I never liked Jojo Diaz at lightweight. He was a 126 guy when he was fighting Gary Russell Jr. for the title. And he was, you know, he beat Tevin Farmer at 130 to his credit. So that was his, you know, moving up in weight. But then he blew weight against Shavkat Rakhimov and ended up vacating that, you know, title, that IBF belt he had just won against Tevin Farmer. And he has been up at 135 since. And to me, it's never suited him. He's not a power puncher, and he's just a little guy with small arms. Just doesn't work well at 135. William Zepeda, on the other hand, is a big lightweight who hits hard as hell. And, you know, Jojo Diaz has big moments of inactivity as well, like where he's not throwing a ton of punches. That enabled Mercito Gesta to win a lot of those rounds. So it was pretty much a question of who was doing more work between the two. Gesta, again, did enough to earn that split decision win, but unlike Jojo Diaz, William Zepeda not only is a hard puncher, but he's constantly coming at you just with that whirlwind of activity. I don't see this going well for Mercito Gesta. He's 35 years old. He doesn't hit that damn hard. And even in the moments where he does exhibit some good boxing, which again, I expect him to have some good moments against William Zepeda, that doesn't deter Zepeda. You're going to have to hurt Zepeda to keep Zepeda off you. If Mercito Gesta does land, is he going to land hard enough and well enough and time it well enough to really buzz Zepeda? I mean, I have seen Zepeda get hurt. I thought he got hurt against Rene Alvarado. I know he got hurt, or at least kind of shaken up later in that fight against Jojo Diaz. Zepeda can get hurt. Is Mercito Gesta the guy to do it though? I mean, it's possible. I just think that it's much more likely that William Zepeda ends up overwhelming Mercito Gesta. And I was going to pick William Zepeda via decision, like a wide unanimous decision, but this is a 12-round fight. If this was a 10-rounder, I'm thinking maybe he beats up on Mercito Gesta. Mercito Gesta does his best to box, but then starts to slow down and takes a lot of shots, but holds on and is, you know, got enough veteran savvy to survive the 10 rounds. But in a 12-round fight versus the young, he's still 27 years old, William Zepeda, I don't see how Mercito Gesta, who turns 36 next month in October, is going to go a full 12 rounds, you know, without hurting William Zepeda. I just see him getting overwhelmed, maybe dropped, or maybe not going down necessarily, but just getting beaten and then getting cornered against the ropes to where the ref comes in and calls it off. I'm going William Zepeda via stoppage here. Yes, Mercito Gesta has looked pretty damn good in his last couple of fights. I just think that matchups wise, this is a totally different individual. He's dangerous. He's extremely active. He's relentless. You better hurt him if you want to keep him off of you. I just don't see that taking place. So yeah, I'm going with William Zepeda via, I'll say late round stoppage. He might drop him in the middle rounds, but I think Mercito Gesta, he's got a lot of heart. He's got a lot of experience. I think he'll make it into the later rounds, but I think he'll get stopped like in the 9th through 11th, somewhere in there. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on William Zepeda versus Mercito Gesta. Are you giving Mercito Gesta a decent shot at winning this one? Or do you think that the betting odds accurately reflect Mercito Gesta's chances here? We're talking about William Zepeda as a 9-1 favorite, a -900, Mercito Gesta as a +800. So, you know, the bettors aren't really seeing Mercito Gesta as being a live dog in this one. How do you see this one? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also give me your thoughts on the state of the lightweight division, as Devin Haney, the undisputed champ, will now be moving up to 140. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.